In the bustling streets of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, a young man named Ibrahim Traore was making waves. He wasn't a politician, nor was he a wealthy businessman. Instead, he was something far more dangerous to those in power. A journalist, with a sharp mind, an unshakable sense of justice, and a voice that refused to be silenced. Ibrahim had grown up witnessing the struggles of his people. Poverty, corruption, and inequality were constants in their lives. But while many chose to look away or accept the status quo, Ibrahim couldn't. From a young age, he dreamed of exposing the truth and giving a voice to the voiceless. As he grew older, Ibrahim honed his skills as a writer and investigator. His articles began appearing in local newspapers, shedding light on issues that others were too afraid to touch. At first, his work focused on small-scale corruption, dishonest officials pocketing funds meant for schools or hospitals. But as his reputation grew, so did his ambitions. He started digging deeper, uncovering connections between powerful figures and criminal enterprises. It wasn't long before his name became synonymous with fearless journalism. One day, everything changed when Ibrahim stumbled upon a story that would catapult him onto the global stage. While investigating shady business dealings in West Africa, he uncovered evidence of a massive embezzlement scheme involving top Nigerian officials. Billions of dollars earmarked for development projects had vanished into offshore accounts, leaving millions of Nigerians without access to basic necessities like clean water and electricity. The scandal implicated some of the most influential people in the country, including ministers, governors, and even members of the president's inner circle. Ibrahim knew this was big, not just for Nigeria, but for the entire region. Corruption didn't exist in isolation. It spread like a disease, infecting neighboring countries and destabilizing economies. If he could expose these crimes, it might inspire others to stand up and demand change. So, armed with mountains of documents, financial records, and testimonies from whistleblowers, he published a series of explosive reports. Each article sent shockwaves through the continent, sparking outrage among ordinary citizens and fear among the elite. But fame has its price. As Ibrahim's stories gained traction, he also became a target. Anonymous threats poured in, some subtle, others overtly menacing. "Stop digging," one message read. "You're playing with fire." Yet, despite the danger, Ibrahim pressed on. He believed in the power of truth and trusted that the world would rally behind him if things got worse. And rally they did. Social media lit up with support for the brave journalist. Hashtags like #Stand with Ibrahim trended across platforms, and activists organized protests calling for accountability. For the first time in years, there was hope that something could be done about the rampant corruption plaguing the region. However, not everyone was cheering. In the corridors of power in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, panic set in. The exposed officials convened emergency meetings, desperate to contain the fallout. They needed a way to silence Ibrahim permanently, or at least discredit him enough to stop his crusade. That's when someone proposed a plan so audacious it bordered on reckless. Lure him to Nigeria under false pretenses, arrest him on trumped-up charges, and paint him as a criminal mastermind. The idea was risky, but they convinced themselves it was foolproof. After all, who would believe a journalist over seasoned politicians? Unaware of the storm brewing against him, Ibrahim continued his work with relentless determination. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from supporters, colleagues, and concerned friends, warning him to stay vigilant. But Ibrahim remained undeterred. He had faced threats before and always emerged stronger. Besides, he had no reason to suspect that his next assignment would lead him straight into a trap. That's when the invitation arrived. A formal letter inviting him to speak at an international anti-corruption summit in Abuja. The event promised to bring together leaders, activists, and experts from around the world to discuss solutions to the very problems Ibrahim had dedicated his life to fighting. It seemed like an opportunity too good to pass up. Here was a chance to share his findings with a global audience, to shine a light on the dark corners of corruption, and to inspire others to join the fight. Without hesitation, he accepted. Little did he know, the invitation was anything but genuine. Behind closed doors, Nigerian officials celebrated what they saw as a brilliant strategy. They imagined the headlines: "Renowned journalist arrested for espionage." They envisioned the public outcry dying down once they smeared his name with fake evidence. To them, it was a win-win situation. Either Ibrahim would fall silent or his credibility would crumble under the weight of their lies. What they failed to consider, however, was the strength of the network supporting him, and the lengths to which he would go to turn the tables on his enemies. While preparations for the summit moved forward, whispers of the conspiracy began to leak. A source close to the planning committee tipped off a whistleblower, who then passed the information to a trusted ally of Ibrahim's. The leaked documents revealed the true intent behind the invitation, a calculated move to neutralize a thorn in their side. When the news reached Ibrahim, he felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How dare they try to use such a noble cause as a cover for their sinister plans? But rather than succumbing to fear, he saw an opportunity. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about sending a message to anyone who thought they could silence the truth. With the clock ticking and the world watching, Ibrahim made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. He wouldn't walk into their trap blindly. Instead, he would expose their plot to the world and force them to answer for their actions. Little did he know, this moment would mark the beginning of a showdown that would captivate nations and redefine the battle against corruption. As the pieces of the conspiracy began to fall into place, Ibrahim Traore found himself at a crossroads. The leaked documents painted a chilling picture. Nigerian officials weren't just planning to arrest him, they were determined to destroy his reputation and career in one fell swoop. Fabricated charges of espionage and terrorism were ready to be rolled out as soon as he stepped foot on Nigerian soil. What made the situation even more alarming was the sheer audacity of their plan. By inviting him to an anti-corruption summit, a gathering supposedly aimed at rooting out graft, they were turning the very ideals of transparency and justice into tools for oppression. It was a betrayal not only of Ibrahim but also of the countless people who believed in the possibility of change. Ibrahim knew he couldn't ignore the threat. Yet simply backing out of the summit wasn't enough. If he canceled without addressing the issue publicly, it would look like he had something to hide. Worse still, it might embolden his enemies to escalate their tactics. He needed a way to expose the plot while ensuring his safety. Sitting alone in his modest apartment, surrounded by piles of research notes and legal papers, Ibrahim began brainstorming. His mind raced with possibilities. Could he release the leaked documents online? Would anyone believe him if he accused high-ranking officials of such a brazen scheme? And how could he ensure that the truth reached as many people as possible? Before they silenced him for good, the answer came unexpectedly. A close friend and fellow journalist suggested a bold move. Instead of quietly canceling his attendance, Ibrahim should go public with everything he knew. "Let them know you're onto them," his friend urged. "If they think you're scared or weak, they'll keep coming after you. But if you hit back first, they won't know what hit them." The idea resonated deeply with Ibrahim. This wasn't just about self-preservation anymore. It was about flipping the script entirely. Rather than walking into their trap, he would use their own arrogance against them. He would reveal their conspiracy to the world and turn what was meant to be his downfall into a moment of triumph. With renewed determination, Ibrahim set to work. He reached out to trusted allies in the media, activists, and human rights organizations, sharing the leaked documents and explaining the gravity of the situation. Together, they devised a strategy to maximize the impact of the revelations. First, they decided to publish the incriminating evidence across multiple platforms simultaneously: social media, independent news outlets, and whistleblower websites. Timing was critical. They wanted the information to go viral before Nigerian officials could spin the narrative or shut it down. Second, Ibrahim planned to hold a live-streamed press conference from Burkina Faso, where he would address the allegations head-on. This would give him a chance to speak directly to the public and explain why he refused to attend the summit. The night before the scheduled release, Ibrahim barely slept. His heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety. On one hand, he felt empowered knowing that he was taking control of the situation. On one hand, he couldn't shake the fear of what might happen next. Would the officials retaliate violently? Would they try to discredit him further? Or worse, would they succeed in silencing him despite his efforts? Despite these doubts, he reminded himself of the bigger picture. This fight wasn't just about him. It was about standing up for everyone who had ever been crushed under the weight of corruption. With that thought in mind, he steeled himself for the battle ahead. When morning arrived, the operation kicked into high gear. At precisely 6 a.m., the leaked documents went live online. Within minutes, the internet exploded with reactions. Journalists, activists, and ordinary citizens pored over the details, stunned by the extent of the conspiracy. Private emails between Nigerian officials outlined step-by-step instructions for framing Ibrahim. Financial records showed payments to operatives tasked with planting false evidence. Even draft press releases condemning him as a criminal mastermind were included. The sheer volume of proof left no room for doubt. This was a calculated attempt to silence a man whose words had grown too powerful to ignore. As the story spread, hashtags like "Expose the Truth" and "You Stand with Ibrahim" began trending worldwide. Arsomewhere, media users shared memes, videos, and infographics highlighting the scandal. Protesters gathered outside Nigerian embassies in cities across Africa and beyond, holding signs that read, "Corruption kills," and "Protect our heroes." Celebrities and influencers joined the chorus, amplifying Ibrahim's message to millions of followers. For the first time in years, it seemed as though the tide was turning. People were angry, not just at the officials involved, but at the systemic rot that allowed such schemes to flourish unchecked. Meanwhile, Ibrahim prepared for his press conference. Dressed in a simple shirt and tie, he sat behind a desk adorned with the flags of Burkina Faso and the African Union. Cameras rolled. As he addressed the audience, his voice steady and resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today I stand before you not as a victim, but as a fighter for justice. Some may see me as a threat because I dare to speak the truth, but let me make one thing clear: I will not be silenced." For the UA, next hour, Ibrahim walked viewers through the evidence piece by piece, explaining how the conspiracy unfolded and why it mattered. He spoke passionately about the importance of holding leaders accountable and urged citizens everywhere to demand transparency from their governments. By the end of the broadcast, tears streamed down his face, not from fear but from gratitude. Gratitude for the support he'd received and for the realization that he was no longer fighting alone. Back in Nigeria, chaos erupted within the corridors of power. Officials scrambled to contain the damage, issuing hurried denials and accusing Ibrahim of fabricating the documents. But their attempts to deflect blame only made them look guiltier. Independent analysts verified the authenticity of the leaks, leaving the officials with nowhere to hide. As the day wore on, it became clear that their plan had backfired spectacularly. Far from discrediting Ibrahim, they had turned him into a global icon of resistance. In the days that followed, the momentum continued to build. Human rights groups filed petitions demanding investigations into the implicated officials. International bodies called for sanctions against those involved. Even some Nigerian politicians distanced themselves from the scandal, fearful of being tainted by association. For Ibrahim, the victory was bittersweet. While he had successfully exposed the conspiracy, he knew the fight was far from over. Corruption was a hydra. Cut off one head and two more would grow in its place. Still, for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Hope that the seeds of change had been planted. Hope that the world was finally waking up to the need for accountability. And hope that together they could build a future free from the shadows of greed and deceit. The aftermath of Ibrahim Traore's explosive revelations sent shockwaves rippling across the globe. What was initially intended to be a quiet operation by Nigerian officials had spiraled into an international scandal, exposing not just their sinister plot but also the deep-rooted corruption that had plagued Nigeria and much of Africa for decades. The leaked documents and Ibrahim's live-streamed press conference had struck a nerve. igniting outrage among ordinary citizens, activists, and even some government insiders who were tired of living under the shadow of dishonesty. For Ibrahim, this was more than vindication. It was validation that his fight for truth could resonate far beyond borders. As news outlets around the world picked up the story, the narrative shifted dramatically. Headlines blared phrases like, "Journalist exposes government conspiracy," and "Nigerian officials plot backfires spectacularly." Major international networks aired segments dissecting the evidence, interviewing experts, and showcasing reactions from people on the ground in both Burkina Faso and Nigeria. In Lagos, Abuja, and other major cities, protests erupted as thousands took to the streets demanding justice. Protesters carried placards bearing Ibrahim's face alongside slogans such as, "Truth cannot be arrested and we want accountability now." Social media buzzed with videos of marchers chanting, sharing stories of how corruption had personally affected their lives. It wasn't just anger fueling them, it was hope. Hope that someone like Ibrahim could stand up to power and inspire others to do the same. But the fallout didn't stop at grassroots activism. Diplomatic pressure began mounting on Nigeria's government almost immediately. World leaders issued statements condemning the attempted arrest and calling for transparency. European Union representatives demanded answers during emergency sessions, while the United Nations Human Rights Council scheduled hearings to investigate the matter further. Even countries traditionally reluctant to criticize African governments joined the chorus, realizing that ignoring such blatant abuse of power would undermine global efforts to combat corruption. For once, Nigeria found itself isolated on the world stage, not as a leader or partner, but as a cautionary tale of what happens when greed overrides governance. Inside Nigeria, however, the response was mixed. While many citizens rallied behind Ibrahim, others remained skeptical. Some pro-government voices dismissed the leaks as fabrications, accusing Ibrahim of orchestrating a smear campaign to tarnish Nigeria's image. State-controlled media outlets ran editorials questioning his motives, painting him as a disgruntled opportunist seeking fame and fortune. Yet these attempts at damage control only deepened suspicions. Why, critics wondered, would the government go to such lengths to discredit a journalist unless they had something to hide? The more they pushed back, the more desperate they appeared, and desperation is rarely a convincing argument. Amidst the chaos, Ibrahim remained calm yet resolute. He understood that the battle was far from over. Exposing the conspiracy was one thing, but ensuring accountability was another challenge altogether. To keep the momentum going, he launched a coordinated campaign aimed at keeping the spotlight firmly on Nigeria's corrupt elite. Working closely with his network of allies, he organized daily updates through social media, posting new pieces of evidence, expert analyses, and testimonials from whistleblowers. Each revelation added another layer to the unfolding drama, making it increasingly difficult for officials to deny their involvement. One particularly damning piece of evidence came in the form of a whistleblower video. A former aide to one of the implicated ministers recorded himself confessing to his role in the conspiracy. Speaking nervously but determinedly, he described how he'd been ordered to forge documents linking Ibrahim to foreign intelligence agencies. "They told me it was for the good of the country," he said, tears streaming down his face. "But I can't live with myself knowing I helped frame an innocent man." The video went viral within hours, further eroding public trust in the government and forcing authorities to issue yet another denial, this time sounding hollow and defensive. Meanwhile, inspired by Ibrahim's courage, other journalists and activists began stepping forward with their own stories of resistance. In Ghana, a reporter revealed how she had been blacklisted after publishing articles critical of her government's handling of public funds. In Cameroon, a group of teachers organized protests against mismanaged education budgets meant to improve classrooms but instead lining officials' pockets. Across the continent, people started connecting the dots, realizing that corruption wasn't confined to one nation. It was a regional epidemic requiring collective action. What began as a personal vendetta against Ibrahim had morphed into a Pan-African movement for transparency and justice. For Ibrahim, this shift was both exhilarating and humbling. He never imagined his work would spark such widespread change. Yet despite the growing support, he knew the risks hadn't disappeared. Threats continued pouring in, ranging from anonymous messages warning him to back off to thinly veiled intimidation tactics targeting his family. One evening, as he sat reviewing documents late into the night, his phone buzzed with a chilling message. Your time will come. Though fear crept in momentarily, it quickly gave way to resolve. If anything, the threats reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. Corruption thrived in silence, and every attempt to silence him only strengthened his determination to speak louder. To protect himself and those close to him, Ibrahim implemented strict security measures. Friends and colleagues helped set up encrypted communication channels, ensuring sensitive information stayed safe from prying eyes. Security experts advised him to vary his routines and avoid predictable patterns. His family, though understandably worried, stood firmly by his side, offering unwavering encouragement. You're doing God's work, his mother told him one day, her voice filled with pride. No matter what happens, we'll always be here for you. As weeks turned into months, the impact of Ibrahim's actions became undeniable. Several high-profile officials implicated in the scandal resigned under mounting pressure, while others faced criminal investigations. Protests persisted, with demonstrators refusing to back down until meaningful reforms were enacted. Activists formed coalitions, pooling resources and expertise to tackle systemic issues head-on. And perhaps most significantly, conversations about corruption entered mainstream discourse in ways they never had before. People weren't just talking, they were acting. Communities organized watchdog groups to monitor local projects, ensuring funds were used as intended. Students launched campaigns to educate peers about the dangers of graft. Artists created murals and songs celebrating integrity and accountability. Through it all, Ibrahim remained a central figure, a symbol of defiance against tyranny. But he never let the attention distract him from his ultimate goal, creating lasting change. In interviews, he repeatedly emphasized that this wasn't about hero worship. It was about empowering ordinary people to hold their leaders accountable. I'm just one person, he often said. Real change comes when we all stand together. Those words resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to join the fight, not out of admiration for him, but out of love for their communities and their continent. By the end of the third act, the landscape had transformed irrevocably. What began as a sinister plot to silence a lone journalist had evolved into a defining moment for Africa. The conspiracy designed to destroy Ibrahim had instead galvanized millions, proving that truth, when wielded with courage and conviction, could topple even the most entrenched systems of oppression. As the world watched and waited to see what would happen next, one thing was certain. Ibrahim Traore's name would forever be etched in history, not as a victim but as a catalyst for change. The momentum sparked by Ibrahim Traore's revelations reached a fever pitch, transforming what began as an isolated conspiracy into a continent-wide reckoning. The scandal had exposed the dark underbelly of Nigeria's political elite, but its ripple effects extended far beyond one country. Across Africa, people who had long suffered in silence found their voices, emboldened by the example of a single man who refused to bow to corruption. What followed was a cascade of events that reshaped the conversation about governance, accountability, and justice on the continent. As protests intensified in Nigeria, they began to spread like wildfire to neighboring nations. In Ghana, citizens took to the streets demanding investigations into allegations of misappropriation within their own government. In Kenya, demonstrators called for reforms in electoral funding after reports surfaced of politicians siphoning public money to finance campaigns. Even in countries where corruption had become so normalized it was rarely questioned, people started organizing petitions, rallies, and social media campaigns. It seemed as though Ibrahim's courage had lit a match, igniting a flame that refused to be extinguished. For many, this was more than just outrage. It was a collective awakening. International pressure also played a crucial role in amplifying the movement. Governments around the world, eager to distance themselves from accusations of complicity, joined calls for transparency and accountability in Nigeria. European leaders threatened to freeze assets tied to implicated officials unless independent investigations were launched. The United Nations convened special sessions to address corruption in Africa, with Ibrahim's case serving as a focal point for discussions. Activists urged global institutions to impose sanctions not only on individuals involved, but also on companies known to facilitate illicit financial flows. These measures sent a clear message. Corruption wasn't just an African problem. It was a global issue requiring urgent action. Back in Nigeria, the fallout continued to escalate. Several high-ranking officials implicated in the scandal attempted to save face by resigning or issuing public apologies, but these gestures did little to quell the growing tide of anger. Protesters dismissed such moves as tokenism, arguing that true accountability required prosecution and restitution. Meanwhile, investigative bodies tasked with probing the allegations struggled to maintain credibility amid accusations of bias and interference. Whistleblowers came forward almost daily, each revealing new layers of deceit and misconduct. The sheer scale of the corruption unearthed was staggering. Billions of dollars funneled out of the country, leaving critical infrastructure projects abandoned and millions of Nigerians trapped in poverty. Amidst the chaos, Ibrahim remained at the center of the storm. While he had initially been the target of the conspiracy, he now stood as its most formidable opponent. His daily updates via social media kept the story alive, ensuring that no detail went unnoticed. He collaborated with journalists worldwide to publish follow-up reports, meticulously documenting every twist and turn in the unfolding drama. At times, he appeared exhausted, his voice strained during interviews, but his resolve never wavered. "This isn't about me," he would often say. "It's about making sure we don't let them win. Not today, not ever." Yet, despite the widespread support, Ibrahim faced immense challenges. The threats against him escalated, forcing him to relocate temporarily to a secure location. Anonymous messages warned him that his life was in danger if he didn't stop speaking out. One evening, a suspicious vehicle lingered outside his family home, prompting panic among his loved ones. Security teams scrambled to tighten protocols, installing surveillance cameras and hiring armed guards. Despite these precautions, the psychological toll was undeniable. Sleepless nights became routine, and moments of doubt crept in. Was it worth risking everything? Could one person really make a difference? But every time doubt surfaced, something happened to reaffirm his purpose. A young girl in Burkina Faso sent him a hand-drawn picture of a superhero labeled Ibrahim. A teacher in Uganda shared photos of her students holding signs that read, "Thank you for showing us the power of truth." An elderly man in South Africa penned a heartfelt letter, thanking Ibrahim for giving him hope that change was possible. These small acts of gratitude reminded him why he had chosen this path, and why he couldn't give up now. Meanwhile, the movement inspired by Ibrahim gained unprecedented momentum. Activists formed coalitions, pooling resources and expertise to tackle corruption at all levels. Some focused on grassroots initiatives, teaching communities how to track local government spending. Others lobbied international organizations to strengthen anti-corruption laws and enforcement mechanisms. Artists, musicians, and filmmakers contributed their talents, creating works that highlighted the human cost of graft. Songs celebrating integrity topped charts, while murals depicting Ibrahim alongside other whistleblowers adorned city walls. The cultural shift was palpable. A generation was rising, determined to rewrite the narrative of their continent. Institutional changes began to take root as well. In response to mounting pressure, several African governments announced reforms aimed at increasing transparency. Nigeria established an independent commission to investigate allegations of corruption, though skeptics questioned whether it would have real teeth. Kenya passed legislation requiring politicians to disclose their assets publicly, while Ghana implemented stricter penalties for embezzlement. Though critics argued these measures were insufficient, they represented a step forward, a sign that public outcry could drive policy change. For Ibrahim, the progress was both gratifying and sobering. On one hand, He was heartened to see tangible results from the movement he had inadvertently sparked. On the other hand, he knew the fight was far from over. Corruption wasn't a disease that could be cured overnight. It was a deeply entrenched system that thrived on secrecy, fear, and complacency. Breaking it down would require sustained effort, unwavering vigilance, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As he often reminded himself, winning battles doesn't mean winning the war. By the end of this phase, the transformation was undeniable. What had begun as a sinister plot to silence a journalist had evolved into a defining moment for Africa, a turning point in the struggle for justice and accountability. The conspiracy designed to destroy Ibrahim had instead united millions in a shared mission to dismantle the structures of oppression. For the first time in decades, there was a sense that change was possible, not because of one man's efforts, but because of the collective determination of ordinary people to reclaim their futures. And as the world watched, waiting to see what would happen next, one thing was certain. The seeds of resistance planted by Ibrahim Traore had taken root, promising to grow into something extraordinary. The dust had barely settled from the whirlwind of events when Ibrahim Traore found himself reflecting on the journey that had transformed not only his life, but also the lives of millions across Africa. What began as a personal mission to expose corruption had evolved into a movement that transcended borders, uniting people under a common cause, the pursuit of justice and accountability. Yet for all the victories celebrated along the way, Ibrahim knew that true change was a marathon, not a sprint. The legacy he hoped to leave behind wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about creating systems and structures that would endure long after he was gone. In the months following the scandal, Ibrahim became more than just a journalist. He emerged as a symbol of resilience. His name appeared in headlines around the world, often accompanied by words like hero and champion. But despite the accolades, he remained grounded, refusing to let the praise inflate his ego. Instead, he channeled the attention into something tangible, a Pan-African watchdog organization dedicated to combating corruption. Named Sankofa Justice Initiative, a nod to the Akan concept of learning from the past to build a better future, the organization brought together journalists, activists, lawyers, and technologists committed to holding power accountable. Its mission was simple yet ambitious: empower citizens with tools and knowledge to challenge corruption at every level. The launch of Sankofa marked a new chapter in Ibrahim's fight. No longer working alone, he now led a team of passionate individuals who shared his vision. Together, they developed innovative solutions to address systemic issues. One of their flagship projects involved creating an open-source platform where citizens could report suspicious activities, whether it was a government official demanding bribes or a contractor cutting corners on public infrastructure. The platform used advanced encryption to protect whistleblowers while ensuring reports reached independent investigators. Within weeks of its debut, thousands of tips poured in, leading to dozens of arrests and exposing schemes that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. But technology alone wasn't enough. Recognizing that education was key to lasting change, Sankofa launched a series of workshops and training programs aimed at equipping communities with the skills needed to advocate for themselves. In rural villages, trainers taught farmers how to track subsidies meant for agricultural development. In urban centers, students learned how to monitor school budgets and demand answers when funds disappeared. These grassroots efforts fostered a culture of transparency and accountability, empowering ordinary people to take ownership of their futures. As one participant put it during a workshop in Burkina Faso, "For too long we've waited for someone else to fix our problems. Now we know we have the power to do it ourselves." While Sankofa gained traction, the broader impact of Ibrahim's work continued to unfold. Across Africa, governments faced mounting pressure to enact meaningful reforms. Some responded positively, passing laws that strengthened anti-corruption measures and increased penalties for offenders. Others dragged their feet, fearing backlash from powerful elites unwilling to relinquish control. But even in those resistant nations, the tide was shifting. Citizens armed with newfound awareness and determination refused to back down. Organizing, Protests, filing lawsuits, and leveraging social media to shine a light on wrongdoing. Corruption, once shrouded in secrecy, was being dragged into the open, and it couldn't survive in daylight. Ibrahim's influence extended beyond policy changes. It reshaped cultural attitudes toward leadership and governance. Artists, writers, and filmmakers drew inspiration from his story, producing works that challenged societal norms and celebrated integrity. A popular Nigerian musician released a chart-topping song titled "Truth Wins," which became an anthem for protesters. In Ghana, a playwright staged a critically acclaimed production based on Ibrahim's experiences, drawing packed audiences eager to see art mirror reality. Even children's books began featuring characters modeled after him, young heroes standing up against injustice. These creative expressions helped normalize the idea that speaking truth to power wasn't just admirable, it was necessary. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Many implicated officials managed to evade full accountability, using their wealth and connections to delay trials or secure lenient sentences. Others fled the country, taking their ill-gotten fortunes with them. For Ibrahim, these setbacks served as reminders of the uphill battle ahead. He often reminded his team, "We're not fighting against individuals, we're fighting against a system designed to protect them. It will take time to dismantle it completely." Still, each victory, no matter how small, fueled his resolve. Every corrupt official brought to justice, every community empowered to hold leaders accountable, and every child inspired to dream of a fairer world reinforced his belief that the arc of history bent toward justice. On a personal level, Ibrahim's life had changed irrevocably. The threats that once haunted him never fully disappeared, though heightened security measures provided some peace of mind. His family adapted to the new normal, finding strength in their shared purpose. Friends and colleagues marveled at his ability to remain optimistic despite the dangers, crediting his unwavering faith in humanity. "Ibrahim sees the best in people," one close ally said. "Even when others lose hope, he reminds us that most people want to do the right thing. They just need guidance and support." As years passed, Ibrahim's role evolved from activist to mentor. He traveled extensively, sharing his experiences with young journalists and aspiring changemakers. Whether addressing university students in South Africa or speaking at international conferences in Europe, his message remained consistent. Change starts with you. Don't wait for permission to make a difference. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. These words resonated deeply, inspiring countless individuals to take action in their own communities. By the time Ibrahim reached his 50s, the movement he helped ignite had become a cornerstone of African society. Anti-corruption initiatives were no longer fringe efforts relegated to activists. They were mainstream priorities embraced by governments, businesses, and citizens alike. Transparency rankings improved, foreign investments flowed into countries previously deemed too risky, and millions of Africans experienced tangible improvements in their quality of life. While challenges remained, the continent was undeniably moving in the right direction. Looking back on his journey, Ibrahim felt a profound sense of gratitude, not for the accolades or achievements, but for the opportunity to serve something greater than himself. He often thought about the proverb his mother used to quote, "When they try to bury us, they fail to realize we are seeds." Those words had guided him through the darkest moments, reminding him that resistance wasn't futile. Every act of courage, no matter how small, planted a seed of hope, and from those seeds, a brighter future grew. In the end, Ibrahim's legacy wasn't defined by the scandals he exposed or the conspiracies he thwarted. It was defined by the countless lives he touched and the generations he inspired to carry the torch forward. He may have started as a lone voice in the wilderness, but he ended as a beacon of light, guiding others toward a more just and equitable world. And as long as there were people willing to stand up for truth and justice, his story would live on, not just as history, but as a call to action for all who believed in the possibility of change.